So how we doing? That's quiet. How we doing?
Awesome.
So. Awesome. Okay. Bill,
Muy bien.
we're doing in Spanish. So, where'd she go? She still here?
I'm assuming so. Yeah, her keys are here.
Okay, she didn't go far. Then we'll wait a moment. Oh. I feel like I hear a phone call. I don't know how you feel like you hear a phone call, but possibly. But we'll say hi to the online people. Hola, ¿cómo estás? So what the Lord's been really just sharing with me this week is about maturing in love. And what does that look like? And we have some stuff here. If you might be able to read my handwriting on the board. May not. I can't promise anything. Let's start with this. It's a term we're all familiar with. It's something that we probably have all quoted. And that's found in 1 Peter 4:8. We're starting in verse 8. So 1 Peter 4:8. Above all things, have fervent love for one another. For love, I love how this is in, I don't know if in your guys' versions, but in the New King James, it's in quotations. Love will cover a multitude of sins. Other translations say that love will put a canopy over a multitude of sins. We're in Shreveport, so I don't know if this is even a reality for most people. But like, you ever have a stain on a carpet that you couldn't get up? So what do? You put a rug over it. You cover it. You don't go, hey, welcome to my house. This stain right here in 1994 was created by a ketchup bottle. A freak accident, this plastic bottle of ketchup fell and shattered, and ketchup went everywhere. It's actually not a murder scene. It's a ketchup scene. And so this ketchup is stained here. You don't do that. You don't point out to it, but you cover it. So love will cover a multitude of sins. Be hospitable, not be a hospital. You can be a hospital too. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. So, what is being hospitable to somebody? Welcoming, inviting, comforting. Well, if I ever need someone to be hospitable to me, I'm going to Judy. She knows the definition. But you want to know what's equal to that when it says that you ought to love one another as you love yourself. The definition of that word is essentially the same as what we would equivalent to being hospitable. So it's telling us to love one another as you would love yourself, or be hospitable to another without grumbling. And I think that's probably our hardest challenge. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards, and be the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. So if you're going to say something, you might as well say something of God.
When I see that about being hospitable without grumbling, to me that's addressing inconvenience.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're going to be asked to do things for others when we don't want to do it. It's the wrong time.
It's an inconsiderate moment. It's not on our to-do list. I already have an agenda. I have my Saturday cut out already. I don't need one more thing to do. Like that type of mentality. But Mary Sue is asking me to help her lift something heavy out of her house. Or whatever it might be. And it could be various tasks. And so, yes, it is addressing that. So if anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it as the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. But I want to focus on love covers a multitude of sin. Whenever we see somebody, when we've been wronged, personally wronged, we start getting into the passive-aggressive Facebook posting or Instagramming. We find videos that are attributed to the things in which how we've been wronged and how we're suffering, and we start trying to vocalize without us vocalizing what's been happened or what has happened, and then we find ourselves telling others, and we start building up these walls, but we call it justice. We start building. I'm going to step on every toe I can possibly think of tonight when it comes to some of this stuff. Not even intentionally. This is stuff I've been just processing all week, where it's our job, as it says in 2 Corinthians 5, that we have been given the ministry of reconciliation, that we've been charged with the word of reconciliation, but we can't reconcile how are we going to reconcile someone to God? How are we going to show mercy and the forgiveness of Jesus if we are not even extending it to one another and we're busy holding grudges over something frivolous, more than likely? They didn't return my country crock butter Tupperware. Or they broke this, but it was an accident. Well, they should have been more careful. We have this mindset that we ought to confront that wrong, but nowhere do you really see that happening. Like you don't see the Jesus. You don't see Jesus really ever confronting the disciples. You see it once or twice. And it was like when they wanted to call fire down from heaven on some folk because they didn't cast out demons like somebody else casted out demons. They didn't pray for him with one hand on their heart and one hand on them, or whatever it was. Whatever it was. And so they're like, let's cast fire down upon them. And then Jesus just goes, you guys don't even know what spirit you're of. You don't even understand what you're doing. But he didn't go to the next city and be like, well, these idiots over here were trying to cast down fire on the city behind us because they weren't praying like they were praying. Love doesn't expose the weakness. Love covers the weakness and lifts up the strength. We tend to do the opposite. instead of boasting in somebody's strength, they're cocky, they're prideful, they're arrogant, whatever. But love also does not boast in iniquities. We see that in 1 Corinthians 13. So when someone fails, when somebody has a mishap in their life, love doesn't celebrate it. Love doesn't go, oh, I knew it. It's actually the opposite. Love hopes that that's wrong. Love wants to believe that iniquity, the thing that has taken place, has actually never existed in the first place. Because the moment they forget, they repent, Isaiah 43:25, I, the Lord, blot out your transgressions for my benefit. So he's already removing and separating. It can't be as far as the east is from the west that he's removed our transgressions from us if he was going to keep them in remembrance. And so he never associated our identity with our shortcomings, with our failings, with our sin. He associated our identity with his attributes, not with our failures. If that was the case, then Adam and Eve would have been up a creek and out of the garden in a much different way. And so there is no nature of the Lord where he exposes darkness. He didn't even expose Adam and Eve. They exposed themselves. He knew where they were the whole time. Think about that in every situation of your life where you could have been hiding at one point. You were hiding in gross darkness, or just having a fleshly moment, or whatever it might be. God didn't expose it. But in fact, he makes darkness his secret place. He dwells in that place, wherever that place is that you think that God could not be in, is the very place that he is in. And probably the place that you think he is in, he's just walked by to go to your darkness. Psalms 18:11 says he made darkness his secret place. His canopy around him was dark waters and thick clouds of the sky. If you want a great example of that, just go in. I saw this video the other day, or this morning. It feels like it's the other day. But it was a pilot going into the eye of Hurricane Ian. You would expect it. He went into the darkness, through the thunderous clouds, through the water, through everything that's there. And then they get in the middle of the eye of the storm, and it's like the most beautiful day you'd ever seen on the inside. It looked like today outside for us. So even in the midst of this darkness, there's beauty that's within it, just like the Lord. The Lord goes inside the darkness, and he makes it his dwelling place. And it's in that darkness is when he begins to create. It's when he begins to mold something. It's when he begins to shift the atmosphere, it's when he begins to plow the ground of our lives. You go back and look at the story of creation with Genesis. Every day ends with an explanation. It was evening and then night. It's establishing the pattern that God is working in the dark and allowing things to settle in the light. He's working in the secret place because what's done in the secret is brought to light, right? So he's doing it in the secret where nobody can see it, And then what happens is as that time rolls around, it's being exposed to light. It's the same thing where Jesus said that a seed must go into the ground and die in order for it to produce life. It has to go into darkness, into the deep, dark place, go through a process, and then out of that, life comes. And that is literally the story of life and creation. And so, we get to do that very thing and go into the darkness of somebody's life, go into the storm. You see them, they've gone up a creek without a paddle, and you get to bring them a paddle. You're like Jesus coming in, walking on water, and you're like, here, I got a paddle, let's get out of here. But oftentimes what happens is we see somebody's darkness and we go, ew, darkness. They don't do it like we do. Can we cast fire upon them? That's not the Lord. The Lord is going to walk along somebody and cover up their shortcoming, their sin. It's never going to expose them. Even the other day, I was walking through a house, and it was asked of me to take a video of said house so they can see what I saw. And I walked in and I realized if I do this, I'm exposing that person because this doesn't represent the best of them. And so I didn't take the video because I didn't want to expose what was there. And we have that opportunity every time with people. We can either expose them or we can cover them. Jumping along. Perfect love drives out fear, but fear cannot drive out love. And these kind of go, like we wouldn't think about it, but these go hand in hand with one another. Because when you're walking with somebody through their darkness, through whatever season they're in that moment that's less than delightful, their greatest fear is no one will see them the same. They don't know if God will walk with them through it. There's all these moments and aspects of how fear could begin walking through that door. But if you come with love, you drive that fear out. It doesn't even get a chance to grow a root. But the opposite of that is control. Because if we know that somebody can live in fear, and we like that, we will try to control that. Because if we can have them living in fear, they'll do what we want them to do and they become our puppet. But if we begin to live in love, we begin to set both of us free at the same time. They get free of the condemnation, the guilt, the fear. They get set free from the burdens of the whole situation. And they realize that whatever it is that they have to walk through, whether it's easy or whether it's hard as all get out, and they feel like they're walking barefoot on thumbtacks or more understandable, Legos. They realize that they can do it because they're not walking alone. And so fear creates a distraction that leads you from love. It doesn't allow you to dwell. You can't serve two masters. You can't live in love and still have fear. But fear comes through the way of knowledge. Fear will come and substantiate itself just like in the spiritual aspect. What will happen is we'll start looking for confirmation for whatever it is that we believe that God wants to give to us because we're seeking what we want. So we start looking for, the Lord said He's going to give me a Mercedes, and so everywhere I go, there's Mercedes. I'm pretty sure there's not Mercedes everywhere you go. It's just because it's on the forefront of your frontal lobe right now that it's actually the Mercedes. You keep seeing Mercedes everywhere.
It's scientifically proven.
Well, yeah, because you become like, you create this form of tunnel vision where you're only seeing the very thing that you're wanting to see. And we do, guys, we do that in politics, we do that in research. We go, oh my God, this side of the political line has a narrative. So does the other side. They're trying to tell you not to listen to the other side. It's the same thing. It's the same thing no matter where you go. And then Jesus just goes, well, I'm not here to deal with any of that. If this was my kingdom, I would do it this way. Fear has a narrative that if it can keep you entrapped, it will. And it'll speak to you all the time. It will manifest in different ways. It'll come through in the forms of sickness. It'll come through in the forms of different physical ailments. It'll come from in the way of the devourer. Well, I'm never going to have enough to pay my bills. And you can't, and it's not necessarily a name it and claim it thing, but what it is you start becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's, as a man thinks in his heart, so he becomes. And so if you constantly think in your heart, if you're always going to be putting forward, well, I'm just timid, I'm just shy, I'm just this. But think about all the other things that we begin to prophesy over ourselves that we think are okay. We don't see that the fact that our fear is basically faith in the wrong purpose. Fear constricts and distracts you from the things of God. Love leads you into freedom and takes you deeper into the things of God. It takes you into places that you thought you would never be in, doing things that you'd never do before. I remember maybe 6 weeks ago, a month, I don't know how long it's been. I feel like I've been in the longest month of my life. But sometime back, and a friend and I were going somewhere, and we were trying to go the shortest distance between two places is a straight line. However, when you're driving, you don't always have the option of straight lines, and so you sometimes have to take turns and down different places that maybe you normally wouldn't want to go. And I remember I was in my vehicle, they were in their vehicle, and I was following them because unless I have the address, I don't know where I'm going anyways. And so but we were on the phone because we didn't have any walkie-talkies, and more people should start driving with walkie-talkies. And so where they were like, I don't know if I should go straight, which is going to be the longer way, but if I go this way, it's a bad part of town. Now, my reply is this. Let's go the quickest way. If anything happens, I'll stop, you go. demonstrating love. And then we just went that way. Nothing happened. See, when we get our eyes focused on the what could happen wrong, guess what starts happening? Have you ever focused so much not to put a hammer your thumb? What do you end up doing, Tom? Have you ever just been so focused on not busting your knuckles while turning a wrench while inside of an engine, Tom? What happens when you focus so hard about not busting your knuckles while trying to turn a wrench on an engine, Tom?
Usually I'm on the floor.
The wrench ends up on the floor covered in red. You usually end up with soap in your mouth. Not you specifically, but other individuals. What? Anyone know the motto of Pringles? Once you pop, you can't stop. Fear is like being on a diet. I'm just going to have a bite of this cookie and then I'll give it to my kid. You want to know who never got a cookie? The kid. But what happens is it becomes like a ball of yarn that gets wrapped around. Have you ever been tangled up in fish line? Have you ever tried to untangle fish line? You know what you're better off doing? Cutting it. Just cut ties with whatever it is and walk in the opposite direction. Don't throw the tangled up fish line in the water. The fish will come after you. So don't bite into fear. Just walk away. When I was getting ready to do this surgery in August, the one I did in August, Bill, when you were getting your knee replacement, did you watch any videos about knee replacements?
Oh, no.
I wasn't about to watch a video about my surgery. I mean, I would have been raptured at that point. I would have just left. I would have been on the plane to San Diego. I would have landed in San Diego. I would have not gotten in a van.
You don't watch how the sausage is made, or you'll never eat sausage.
This is true. It just kills you. It just kills you. Sometimes spiritually, sometimes mentally, sometimes emotionally, sometimes metaphorically, sometimes physically. Notice how the disciples never asked where they were going. We weren't even on the road for 27 minutes before Bill was asking me the address to the cabin we were staying at in North Carolina. And in West fashion, you'll see it when we get there. I eventually gave it to him. But he wanted to know where we were going. Bye, guys. Make good decisions. Sometimes we just got to do like Carrie Underwood said and let Jesus take the wheel. Because you can't have hold of the wheel and him at the same time. That's not how that works. He may let you sit up front, but he's not asking for a co-pilot. How's this settling right now? Let's jump into 1 Corinthians. Obviously, we're going into the area. Love is patient, love is kind, love endures all. That thing. Let's start first with love is kind. If you want to, here's a Bible cheat for you. The fruits of the Spirit and the description of what love is are the same thing. They're just told to two different people groups. One's told to the Corinthians, the other one's told to the Galatians. Apparently the Galatians liked fruit. The Corinthians were a little bit more philosophical. So love is kind. What does that mean? When you read that, love is kind. Notice how I skipped love is patient because I'm still working on that. I'm working on all of this. Or it's working on me, one of the two. This is like 3,000 grit sandpaper in my life. It's rough. It's working out the rough edges. So when you read love is kind, what does that mean to you? How do you hear? What does that speak to you?
Thinking of others.
Mm-hmm.
Tenderness towards others.
Tenderness towards others. Caring. Gentle. But why do you think this is in there? Because oftentimes here's what we go. You're not a Christian. You're not being kind. But now are we being kind? That's the question. It's actually spoken to us because he's speaking to what is supposed to be mature believers. Guys, if you're going to walk in the identity of who God is, you need to remember He is kind. So when you're being persecuted, when you're being agitated, instead of building up an offense and walking away, respond in kindness. When they're ready to persecute you, respond in kindness. It's becoming more of a commandment to us of explaining who we are to be like and what we are to be like. How we are to treat others. Now see, when we're in situations that our knower knows somebody's being dishonest with us, we want to jump right all over that. They're lying. I know they're lying. I had 2 dreams and a fish visited me in spirit and told me. I can prove it. But they're saying they didn't. 1 Corinthians has an answer for it. Love believes all things. That's a hard thing to swallow. Love believes the best in a person. That person wasn't intentionally trying to be dishonest. That person wasn't intentionally trying to do this.
Eric, are you saying that love should believe false
Love believes the best in someone.
Say that again?
Love believes the best in someone.
Okay.
That's really what it comes down to.
It's not love is gullible.
It is. Love is very gullible. That would be like, I'm not going to do this for someone because I know they're not going to be grateful. And then they tell you to your face, "Oh, I'm very grateful." And then 3 days later, you hear it from someone else's face. You know how much stuff they said about you? And it's choosing to go, "Well, they told me they were grateful." That comes back to love seeks to understand, not to be understood. We often want to be understood, but love seeks to understand. You need to know how much this bothers, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. All the accusations under the sun. That's promoting self-righteousness.
I have a question.
I may not have an answer, but we'll try.
If you have someone that continually talks about how they're not understood, no one understands what I'm going through, and they say that constantly, what would you say to that person?
What would I say to that person?
Yeah, because
Your life's not that difficult. I mean, there's a difference between suffering and bad decisions. So I couldn't give a blanket answer, but typically when people go, "You have no idea," and they're constantly, they have more drama than like soap operas.
and a victim mentality.
And they're always the victim of their story.
Yeah. And no one ever understands.
And no one ever understands them.
Right. What? That's hard because you wanted to say
You don't want to say anything. You want to slap them.
sometimes, like, wicked.
And the thing, and part of it is, so in that, because in the flesh we want to slap them. Well, let's pretend that we're actually just learning about what love is. What do you mean you're going through a hard time? And so you start trying to understand. So then what happens is you're dying and getting delivered of your aggravation towards the situation. And they're having someone trying to understand. So when the next time they come around and they go, "No one understands," well, I'm trying to understand. That's why I was asking you last time. But help me understand this time. Eventually, people will come out of the illusion of what, because they're self-prophesying. And while they're telling everybody that no one understands, they're probably isolating themselves more and more in the process. Well, Mary Sue, no one understands you because you've removed yourself from everybody that loves you. It's not that nobody understands. They're just figuring that you want your space because you're not allowing them to be around. So am I just supposed to go tell them I'm having a hard time? Yes. Even though we're prophetic, doesn't mean that we know everything. Does that help? Or does that just make it worse?
I think that person would also be struggling with a distraction of the enemy making them, like, they're taking the bait that nobody can walk in my shoes, so
Right.
therefore I can't.
That's not the enemy. That's pride.
Which would be a distraction, right? Pride.
I mean, it's going to lead them down to a fall. Pride comes before a fall. And so what's happened is they've elevated themselves above God. Because Jesus understands everything that we've gone through because he had to endure. And so no one can walk in my shoes, blah, blah, blah. That's all pride.
You can never say something to a person that just continually just gets offended if you say anything other than what they want to hear. They control. You can't have a normal conversation
Yeah.
with someone because they're going to be offended if you say a true thought that you have that you would want to help them at some point, but you just have to be quiet or they'll be offended.
That's where it's wise as serpents, gentle as doves. And learn it and
I mean, this is years going on.
yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is probably, well, part of it is because it's been, you're going to have, in that situation, there's going to have to be an abrupt shift of things. Because what happens is we enable something for so long for somebody to go that direction in our life that we would call it a boundary. But really it's kind of like the idea of like when you have like a railroad and the railroad's going this direction and then all of a sudden it goes this way. That's what you have to do. But that's going to come through a jarring of a moment and where you're going to go, listen here, Sally Mae. Maybe not in that way, but in your way, you're going to go, you've been saying this for years. You want to know how I know? Because I've been walking with you for years. You're not alone. It's not that no one understands. You have people around you that want to understand. But you got to stop surrounding yourself with this negative reinforcement that's constantly happening because it's becoming self-fulfilling at this point. Your way of thinking and your way of living has led you to this place. Instead of being in control in this moment, why don't we let go and just allow the Lord to be the Lord in your life? Let him sort these things out. You don't need to, because what it is it's a fear-based thing where they're trying to control every corner of a situation because they're trying to control the narrative because they're afraid of what's going to come out about them. If it's been years, guess what? They already know. And you want to know what? The people that are still around you and they still know all your crap. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. These people clearly love you. They're still here. If they weren't, they wouldn't be here. That's the end. It's that simple. And that love hopes all things. Love hopes each and every time it's the last time. See, our understanding is when someone's giving false testimony or we know we think that something's not going to change, is we want to kick into discernment and start trying to discern between good and evil. But discernment was never intended for good and evil. Discernment was to discern God, not good and evil, not right and wrong. It was to find God. Your homing beacon, if you would, is to find the Lord in a situation, not to find the wrong and right and wrong, the good and evil, not to find the enemy. It's to find what God is doing in the midst of it. Because even if the enemy comes in like a flood, what does God do? He raises a standard. He comes at a higher level. So it doesn't even matter how much of a flood comes in of the enemy, God still sits above him. And It's pointing that person to where God is in their life. Which is really the better understanding of the prophetic, is pointing back to where God is in somebody's life. So love hopes all things is going to hope that whoever that individual is, that this time would be the last time. But then it'll be, if it comes up again, this time will be the last time. Love doesn't seek after itself. Love doesn't seek to be right in a matter. Love doesn't seek to be understood. Even in an unjust scenario, love isn't seeking for its own justice. Love is looking for the Lord's justice. Seeking after yourself is going to fall into needing to be right, wanting to be understood, casting blame, demanding your own way, or self-seeking. It's going to be always in this confrontational mentality of like, well, this person did this wrong. They need to be confronted. There's right and wrong ways to handle things. And so when, Miss Judy, you teaching little kids, you probably see kids do stuff wrong all day long. And not just like wrong academically, behaviorally. Do you correct every single situation? It'll work itself out. The little children mafia will work it out amongst themselves, and they'll roll around their little cliques and power wheels. And, years back, I was with my niece. We were in Vancouver, Canada. We were playing in this outdoor, playground area. And she was like 2 or something, and learning how to slide by herself, and, mom's not around, so there's no, parachute around. So there's just Uncle Wes around. And which means everything goes, not really, but close. But I'm just watching her. I'm letting her experience life. And so she slides down, and then she throws her hands up in celebration, and she's like, yeah, Well, she gets off the slide one time, and this little kid, a little bit older, runs by her and shucks her with his shoulder. And he was probably 5. I was ready to fight a 5-year-old. And I watch my niece, and my niece starts chasing this kid. And I'm like, at first, everything in me is like, you need to stop this. It's about to be a toddler throwdown. And I just hear the Lord say, step back, let it play out. And she goes up to that kid, and his back is turned towards her, and she taps him on the shoulder, and she hugs him. He may not even been aware of what he had done. So he had no idea why I was ready to fight him. And he may have no idea why she hugged him. But he had an encounter with love that day. He didn't even know he did anything wrong. Do you know people would actually do better if they weren't aware of what they did wrong? That you begin to love them and you just walk with them. Because if you walk with someone long enough and you're loving them in the process, they're going to see the error of their ways. Because they're going to eventually realize People always think that if you're loving someone, it's like positive reinforcement. These people aren't dogs and cats. They're not treat geared. They're treat oriented. They're not orcas at SeaWorld. If they do something bad and then you give them a fish and then the next thing you know, they're eating their trainer. When people experience love without condition, without hook, and they see it just walk with them, and then what happens is they see your demeanor and your character the whole time. Because people know when they're acting a fool. There ain't a person in here that doesn't know when they've acted a fool. All I can think about right now is there was a horrible accident on Yuri coming here. And I'm trying to get out of the way for the fire truck, but this person in a Mercedes or a BMW, I don't remember what it was. Now I'm trying to block it out of my mind. Is swerving all around us. This is on the way here. I'm in my car listening to Rick Pino and every other worship leader I can think of, trying to find the Lord. And my flesh is like manifesting because this guy is literally almost causing an accident, going in the opposite direction of the accident. So it's not like he was trying to get to anyone. I don't even know if it was a guy, this driver. And cuts me off, and starts cutting people off left and right. And I was like, forget this. Backwoods Louisiana drivers, I'm going to show them what's up from California. That's right. We know Fast and the Furious. And so I get in front of him. And I do it much safer than this person did. And then I just slow down. And the moment I realize they're going to switch lanes, I speed up a little bit. And I'm just playing mental games with this person. And all I can think about right now, God, I was an idiot. I shouldn't be. There's no way in the world I should be teaching this right now. I'm doing the exact opposite. I didn't care. I thought about that, to be perfectly honest. I didn't care. I was hoping we would get out at the same place. But I want to justify it because this guy was cutting other people off. Who was I really justifying? My own stupid nature. Being hot-headed.
That could have been the ER doc who got the call.
No, not at all. The AMBO hadn't even gotten there yet. So, see, I'm still trying to justify it. It wasn't the ER doc. Love covers a multitude of wrongs. There's no need at all, whatsoever, to remind someone of anything they do wrong. Ever. I don't think we understand sometimes how strong demonstrating love to somebody is. And how much it really can change a person. How it can build their confidence. Yes, there is discipline in love. Don't get me wrong. God disciplines those he loves. But our idea of discipline is not his idea of discipline. And that's where But we are so busy trying to control one another. In all reality, on a good day, we might be able to control a quarter of ourselves. I would say today was a good day. There was maybe 38 seconds of stress in all of my day. And everything else was just coasting and being creative. But something had me so wound up that I wanted to prove a point to person in the car cutting people off. There's no good reason to it. There's no good logic to it. Bill's absolutely right. That could have been the surgeon. That could have been someone rushing to get their kid from daycare. I don't know anything. That just makes me a butthead. But we can't. We can't control others. If we're wanting to control others, it's because of fear. Fear and control are like, I'm not going to use that. Fear and control go hand in hand. They're pretty much the same thing. One's just wearing a mask, calling itself something different. It'd be like going and getting Sam's Club samples. Well, it'd be like me going there with my beard and then going into the bathroom real quick, shaving, and then going back through the same sample one. It's the same person, just looks slightly different. But we're always wanting to control people. We can't. Trust me, if I could, I would. To be perfectly honest, I was pretty good at it. I can get people to do all sorts of stuff I wanted to. And I'd even get, but like in the sense like, but I knew it was good for them. I'd get people to come to church. Well, hey, come to church with me. I want you to check this out. That's manipulative. Because like, hey, can you come to youth with me? We need your help with something. But they're really not in a place where they don't want to be there. They're just doing it because they love you. You want to know who's doing the real good act? Them, not me. I'm just being manipulative. Because we're always in a place trying to gain somebody's love or affection or trust or appreciation. In Matthew 3:17, the skies break open as Jesus is getting baptized. And he says, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." What had Jesus done before that? If Matthew's in chronological order, what did Jesus do before that? No. He hadn't done a darn thing. All he had done was live and breathe for 30 years. If we are having to do certain things to earn somebody's love, that's not a love that we want. And I'm not even talking in like relationally between like two individuals in the sense of like romance, but I'm talking about in any context, whether it be parent, whether it be child. Love should be love because love is love. We've all heard the saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or art is in the eye of the beholder. Familiar with those concepts? Then love is not love until it is defined as such by the recipient. It'd be like me taking my bottle of apple juice and throwing it at Bill and saying I did it because I love him. Bill, is that going to feel very loving?
I believe all things.
So therefore, Bill is now walking in love for the first time and believing all things. And I hope he didn't mean that sarcastically, because love hopes all things. But realistically, that's not love. But if I went and bought apples and cleaned them and juiced them, however you juice an apple, and handed Bill a mason jar of apple juice, I said, hey, I made this for you. That'd be love. But if I had to do that in order to gain Bill's love, that's not love. Now, if Bill was allergic to apples and I did that, it's also not love. But if Bill out of the kindness of his heart he can appreciate the gesture. But Bill's understanding of love is not apples, nor apple juice, nor mason jars. Maybe he's a fan of mason jars. Everyone's a fan of mason jars. But he doesn't necessarily see that as love. See, part of loving another is dying to yourself, denying your right, and coming to the place of where somebody sees what love is. See, Jesus hadn't done anything. What was God pleased in him? Well, God was pleased that he was his son. Jesus hadn't even gone into the wilderness yet to be tempted. We don't even know if he was a good carpenter. Love without intention, in the sense of like you're not doing it to manipulate a situation, and walking with somebody will change their life if it's genuine, if it's real. And coming into a place of stepping out of your comfort zone so that someone else can see what love is, that's love. take a situation like maybe you ask somebody to do something and they did it to the best of their ability. But it's not exactly how you would do it or how you wanted it done. Even if you explained how you wanted it done. Our natural reaction is telling them how they didn't do it right, how they did it wrong, how they didn't meet up to your expectation. But the way that love would handle it, wow, you really put your all into this. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's not what I would have done. Because what will happen is, you may have to redo it. But they'll eventually see what it is. Because think about do you think the ark, like the big boat, was built exactly like to the T in like however Noah was shown? There's no proof of that. He was just told to make it a certain length. You don't think it was off by a centimeter? He didn't have a ruler.
Look, they built the temple exactly according to plan.
That was later on. They had more technology.
Not to disagree with you. What I see is the Lord's not going to tell you how you did it wrong, but I think the Lord's going to do as he interacted with the Father. Watch me.
Mm-hmm. So all we have actually is one. We have what was told on how to build the temple. And how you're gonna have this color and this type of drapery and X, Y, and Z. But all they had was a skeleton. They had an outline. They had a blueprint. We're always wanting to put the additional stuff around it. And God gave them a blueprint and gave them liberty to build it. But he said, I want it like this. But he wasn't down there, hey! That's 120th of an inch off. Or cubit. The Bible is laced with people who did stuff incorrectly. And God led them down a path that brought them into justification. David was far from perfect. You can even see the humanity coming out in Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when he wanted the disciples with him. We all know the disciples were far from perfect. But it never changed his love for them. And he always walked with them the same. That relationship, that sonship, supersedes everything else. I was watching a show last night. I'll close with this. And I don't know if any of you watch Chicago Med, but I like the show. And new season, so new cast members are coming in, and there's this doctor who he's a resident, so he's not fully a doctor yet, but he's working on it. And he wasn't able to incubate a patient, and because when he was in school, it was during COVID, and so they had to do everything by video and online. So like they're incubating dummies. And so everything was working with the dummies. So when it came to a live patient, he was incapable of doing it. And one of the doctors that was in the ER clinic was like super harsh, like, I don't have time to waste with you, blah, 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 yada, 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 putting this person down. And that person is now the supervisor. And then towards the end of the episode, that guy that is the newbie gets his moment of redemption. And the guy who used to be the supervisor in the ER pulls him aside and says, and they're like, what am I doing in here? And he goes, you see this right here, this dummy? This is going to be your best friend. Welcome to boot camp. I'm going to help you learn how to do what you didn't get really taught to do. There's always two ways of walking with somebody. We get to choose. God leads us into correction with loving kindness. Nowhere in Scripture does it say the persistent rebuke leads us to repentance. It's the loving kindness of God that leads us to repentance. It's His goodness to us. If God is using loving kindness and goodness to lead people into righteousness, don't you think it would work with the people around us? If we truly loved them and truly showed them goodness and truly showed them kindness, even when it's hard. A friend of mine would always say, love hard when it's hard to love. Look what God did in Genesis. He drew closer after the fall when it was hard to love.